But first off, welcome everyone. Yeah, so I'm curious for the cluster members, kind of what your thoughts were for the Tuesday meeting. I felt like we've done this a couple times, trying to get feedback from the larger community at ESIP. Maybe I'm a little sensitive to it, but I just feel like maybe the format isn't best for ESIP, of trying to like throw topics at them, and that maybe in the future we do more walkthroughs of the guidelines and the more recent editions and spend time on that and examples. I'm not sure. So I'm really curious to hear what folks thought about this particular session and what you feel like we should do moving forward. Before our feelings about it sort of,
I've never seen you this down, Adam. What's up?
I didn't mean to be down. I didn't mean to be down. I think
your body language is screaming it.
I think I think I just want it to be meaningful for people coming to the sessions. We seem to get really good attendance, and that's great, but I want it to be valuable. And maybe it's not the right venue, I feel like, for feedback, but I'm curious what y'all think.
I think from my personal position, a lot of what you were trying to ratify this time wasn't of immediate need for me. Where my personal push points on schema.org are. So it didn't cover any of that, so I was just taking a back seat on it. But yeah, I can remember the heady days when we started doing this, and it was like really, it was exciting. You met Heroes Talk, right, from yesterday? Were you at that?
I had to miss it, unfortunately.
Right. So we talked about the curve of technologies and how there's this like very shallow hill after the initial surge of it being new, and then people are used to it, but we've got to incrementally build on it till we get to a point where we can really push again. I get the feeling we're in that. If anybody remembers what the actual phrase Hero used on his Mars talk was, but I think you are in that phase right now. And that might be reflected in the reception you've got in this particular session. In this summer ESIP, I don't think it's because it's the wrong forum for it. I just think you're at a point where the enthusiasm and feedback isn't going to be as much as it was. That's got you thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I'll react to that too. I mean, I agree, Adam. It would be really awesome to have deep engagement and sort of get confirmation that the direction we're taking is really meeting the needs of the folks that we're trying to target across the ESIP community. And it's hard because some of the issues are a bit technical, and we tend to dive quickly into those, and that might then challenge. I think a lot of people probably have a lot more opinions about this when they've actually done made an attempt at trying to convert their own data into this format, and they run into both questions and challenges that they then might want to raise with us. So I wonder if maybe, by doing a set of hands-on sessions or something with folks, maybe we could get more feedback through hands-on experiences, trying to create schema.org that follows the guidelines, than to sort of somewhat abstractly talk about the guidelines, outside of doing. I don't know. So Karen had a comment in the chat that you should raise as well, Karen.
Yeah, it was just a personal comment that where I'm coming from is I'm a data facility person. I know that schema.org is a thing. It's an important thing. We've actually implemented it for a couple of our holdings. And I know that the work of this group is to move the standard forward, but personally, I'm interested in that sort of, not the highest level big picture, but moving another step down into, what has really changed in the past year? How is it being applied? What do I need to know about? And I loved your idea of the hands-on session.
Yeah.
Like I said, we did implement for a couple of groups, but our search results are just not happening. So there's something that we need to tune or improve. So sort of help working through that would be pretty cool.
What do you mean your search results are just not happening?
So when you search in either just the Google dataset search or geocodes on terms that should bring our data back, it's not coming back, or it's coming so many pages down that I don't think people are going to get there.
I've seen a lot of fluctuation in the functionality that Google Dataset Search is giving us, which might be reflected in your results. Like, I swear I remember one time, and Ruth maybe had to back me up, when you could actually do temporal and spatial searches in Google Dataset Search, and now you don't seem to be able to. So that might be part of, we don't know, that might be part why you're not seeing these results you're expecting, or the results you used to get, because it seems to be like a moving set of goals right now. One day it does one thing and another day it does another.
Well, I think
Interesting, Doug.
that's true. But
Well, Natasha told us that they weren't going to do spatial and temporal search.
There was a time when I was getting some results out of that, and so maybe they dropped it. I don't know. I remember Ruth doing the search for Nebraska and finding Nebraska data. You remember that, Ruth?
yes, yes.
That's what I was referring to.
So it is true that I think that Google folks are kind of moving away from time and spatial search because they expect other communities to do that. And because they're trying to go for data of all kinds, in which case, spatial and temporal search doesn't even matter for most of those things. So
Do you think they should be? I mean, none of us are as up to their natural language parsing abilities. That would be a huge part of it.
Well, yeah, I agree. But they have a business model and we're not in it. Because our stuff is free and that's just the way it's going to be, And I don't want to change the free part of our stuff because I think that would be bad for science, or actually bad for humanity.
Well, none of their business plan plays into Google Dataset Search, though, right?
They like to search things for free. They'll just put ads on the Google Dataset search page, right? I mean, that would be their business model, right?
Well, that would be their business model, but I think they're starting to put it this way. The field is changing, but I do think that they are counting on the work that people like Geocodes and those kind of groups are doing. And I think one of the reasons why Peter Fox thought that getting this endorsement through ESIP was probably one of the more important things that could happen, is because that, I think, would tend to stabilize, in particular, things like time and spatial search. Actually, I think it's time, space, and parameter are the three that most earth sciencey type people care about. And so I really am strongly supporting that, because we do know that when ESIP endorses something, the world, albeit slowly, does change. So I'm still voting strongly for that. And let's face it, the Polder group is still, they're actually getting funding from CodeAid to implement this. I believe Doug is on here somewhere, maybe Phil's. Yes,
I am. I'm not part of any kind of funding.
Okay. Well, somebody's being funded. Chantel, are you here?
Chantel Ridsdale, yep. I don't know if you're looking for Verahe.
I think so.
Yeah, she's with the World Data System. I don't think she's here. Sorry.
Ah, poop. Oh, well, yes, because well, it's because the World Data System / CoData is trying to fund a federated search using Google Dataset Search that has time, space, and parameter. And they want to hit, there's like 80 repositories that they're in particular interested in hitting. So, but we are making slow progress, and I hope we continue that. But I take Karen's point really well. I mean, it's one thing to work on guidelines, but it's another thing to train everybody on how to use them, etc.
Yeah, and maybe we can take this transition from bringing the guidelines to an ESIP endorsement to schema.org sessions in the future at the meetings to be more a walkthrough of what's changed and a little bit more hands-on. And I like Matt's idea there of using that as a vehicle to get feedback. Just make it a little bit more tangible to folks.
Yeah, I wonder if it needs to be during a session, or if maybe we could try to do it during one of our calls, and we could try to put out like a general call and ask people that, we know might be interested in doing an implementation to come, and we could try to break into breakout rooms or something, breakout rooms, and try to walk through things with folks that are trying to implement.
Yeah.
And then we would be purposely taking note of both pain points and things that people didn't either like or thought should be different.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, so we've got a nice chunk of time here, 75 minutes left. We do have some notes on some of these topics, so what do you think? Should we just jump into what we heard on Tuesday and see if we can progress some of these issues?
Sounds good. I do know that Leslie has her hand raised. And Leslie, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, please, Leslie. Sorry, missed that.
Sorry, it's 5 a.m. over here and freezing and -5. Look, I've already written here, I'm probably coming at it another angle. The other thing I think you need to do is try and promulgate what you're doing a bit wider. And so that's why I sent that email to you to ask if you guys would like to do something in one of our lightning sessions at the next ESIP RDA Earth, Space and Environmental Science group. And then the other thing too is I'd love to try and organise something where you guys can give a webinar in Australia if you're willing.
Yeah.
So I think this is the hardest part, to go from something to you're moving to try and operationalise it. And it's, when do you stop promulgating and letting people know, oh, this is there, and actually getting the rubber to hit the road and get some results. So yeah, I can't really offer much advice. Only been there, done that a few times, and it's not easy. And is sort of doing an ESIP wide, say 2-hour webinar or something like that, as well as having a hands-on, what do we call it, a clinic. We're running a clinic on schema.org. What are your problems? Can we help you, sort of thing? Which I think is going along the same lines as what the others have said.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Leslie. Yeah, happy to help there with the RDA meetings, and maybe switching over to thinking more strategically about when to run some sort of hands-on webinars and presenting some opportunities like that. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think when we
sorry,
finalize this 1.3, and people will be excited to have something to look at that they can implement and not be thinking about what they might want to add to improve it, or a lot of times it's a lot easier to take something that's just there, implement it, and deal with the limitations and not think, okay, well, let's try to add this and think about that and talk about, you know, the data repository people are more like, I can do this. Here it is. I can do this. It's done sort of idea. So I think if we get this 1.3 set and ESIP approves it, then, you know, promoting it will be a lot easier, and sort of telling people about it and running them through it and all that sort of stuff will be, I think things will go a lot smoother.
Yeah. Great. All right, so I'm going to paste in the chat the link to the issue. Let's see. So the first issue we talked about on Tuesday was citation for related resources. Let's see. Where's the Zoom chat? Go. Of course, the link didn't come over. I can share my screen with this link. All right, can y'all see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so let's see. Does anyone have thoughts or things that they want to progress here with citation? Yeah, I think the first thing that we heard was, you know, maybe the field citation isn't necessarily useful on its own. And so we did have some discussion about whether, you know, we needed other fields. So I guess one thought I had was, you know, do we use the schema.org citation field and then add additional fields, or are we foregoing the citation field altogether? What do folks think?
Well, I think the other point that was raised was that I think there was some question about whether we should be using schema.org citation and instead use, and I think Ted raised the issues around why don't we just use the same model that DataCite uses to do a link and link type. So we're not actually including citation information in the schema.org record per se, but rather including just a link to related identifiers or other types of more explicit linked roles to other identifiers. And I think in general, it's, it's a good suggestion. I think, when we think about what goes in a citation, what we're really trying to do is to link to an external resource that's globally identifiable. So it's not bad. It does make it harder to do some sort of a human readable version of it. You have to resolve that link. So I don't know if people really want to put a lot of stuff in their SO citation, or if they'd rather just have links to the same roles that we identified before. I think are relevant, as well as the other ones that we listed from the DataCite typology. But
so I would suggest let's not duplicate metadata, that if it is somewhere else already and it's not one of the main, like discovery criteria, let's just reference that. And so if that's DataCite metadata or whatever you want to call whatever, citation metadata your place is using, I would rather just use that. I mean, and just point to it. I mean, duplication of metadata is a bad idea. Mostly because it never is duplicated precisely, and then you end up with the next problem of which is the right one, because you have to update them all.
So Ruth, can you do you mean use the vocabulary from DataCite, or do you mean not even include this information in the DataCite in the schema.org record at all?
Well, I'm quite sure there's a way to get to that DataCite metadata, right? There's an identifier. It's like, what is it? It's just a DOI, right?
Yeah, only for records that use DOIs and only for the top level item, not for things that might be, say, granules within a DOI that have metadata. So that's why I was asking. The data site vocabulary can be applied much more broadly than data site itself applies it when, you know, they limit their world to pretty much DOIs.
I guess the question is what do the various repositories do for anything below what they have in data site? And I don't know that anybody's looked at that in general, but are they using similar data site type metadata fields for that? Or, I mean, I'm quite sure every single metadata standard in the entire world has a citation mechanism.
Yeah, but they also have title and all the other data. I was kind of like thinking, you know, everything in schema.org entries is pretty much duplicated because it's all, you know, the basic information about a data set that's present in pretty much every metadata standard. So
yes, I agree, which is why like the Polder group is really only working on, you know, discovery metadata. And if you want, you know, more metadata than that to do something beyond discovery, then a link to the full metadata record is where I think things should go. I don't really like the idea of duplicating in schema.org everything that exists in everybody else's metadata records. If you're using schema.org directly for things beyond discovery, then a link to the full metadata record and the ability to read that would be, I think, more appropriate. And that's the whole distinguishing feature between what I would consider to be Google's generic search, a disciplinary, you know, discovery search, and, you know, detailed domain specific or topic specific kinds of aggregations. And you want to enable all of those, but I don't think you want to duplicate everything, if you know what I mean. In other words, we have ISO 19115. Yes, we have like 125 million versions of ISO 19115, any version of the standard you care about. But duplicating all of that? No way. Even with FGDC and those kind of standards or DDI, I don't think you want to duplicate those in schema.org. I think you want to get to the point where schema.org can point you to them. Right.
yeah, so we have that.
Lightweight. Right. Yes, I agree totally. Karen, you stated it so much better than I did. Thank you.
Teamwork, Leslie.
All right. You know, so it sounds like, you know, we're not going to say everyone needs to present the citation field or fields, you know, as a requirement, but for those who do want to do that, you know, I think we should at least have some guidance there on the best way to do that.
I think also some people would argue that it is discovery level metadata. It is the kind of thing that you would want if you're building, for example, in a harvester and you want to make cross-reference linkages between, you know, a resource and its parents. The same reason we have provenance metadata in the schema.org record. You know, we're trying to link to the papers and other things that, you know, are associated with a data set, just so that those cross linkages can show up in a discovery system like Google or others. But Ruth's commentary has me sitting here chewing on what is the scope of what we're doing, as well as Karen's keep it simple kind of call, which others have made recently as well. So
Yep. I don't know if we can get Martin Fenner's opinion, or at least like hear how they've approached what to put in the citation field and what not to in their own data site schema.org. Because I know that every reference that we've put in there doesn't always show up in the schema.org citation field at data site. So it might be that they just have a strategy of, okay, if the citation has a DOI, then we put it in, but I'm not sure. But I'd be curious anyway, to know how they're approaching it, so that there's at least some consistency about what they're doing and what we're recommending.
That
Maybe.
sounds like an action item.
Yeah, I can check on that. I am in weekly contact with that group. So
Okay,
from a
that'd be
account.
great.
So
And I note Karen's last sentence. We don't have to. I would maintain it's impossible to fully standardize our metadata. It's not going to work. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just dealing with astronomy data, biology data, and earth science data has definitely taught me there's no way to do this. And just wait till you have to deal with magnetic field coordinates.
All right. Okay, great. Thanks, Matt, for checking in with Martin.
but I'd like to point out that that citation field that you're talking about in terms of like how a data set, like it's a citation string that represents, the citation for a data set, is different from some of the other concepts that are in the ticket around a usage citation, literature cited, and other types of references to external things that utilize the data set. So we still have to differentiate those use cases if we're going to go anywhere with this one.
Yeah.
And I agree that if you're going to do that, then you need some sort of type field for that citation to say what kind of type citation it is. Is it a citation to another resource? Is it a citation that we want you to use if you use this resource, etc.? So
in the recent past, we've started adding other vocabularies to the record instead of trying to get schema.org to incorporate a new term. We've just used other vocabularies. And so, I mean, one potential route for this would be to just use the data site link type vocabulary that comes out of the Scholix program and just provide guidelines that people, if they want to link to external resources, they should go ahead and use that vocabulary, which has, I think, as Ted pointed out, many dozens of link relationships. I don't know, what do you think? Like, the external vocabulary versus the schema.org vocabulary is still kind of this ongoing tension for us.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Sorry, I basically said that where an external vocabulary exists, my personal opinion is it should be reused. But that's just my opinion.
Knowing that Google won't see it then, right? Because that is the trade-off. Google doesn't see anything that's not in the schema.org vocabulary. It ignores everything else.
Google's job is a generic job, the one that, whatever her name was, I keep forgetting, I don't know what, Natasha. And she's stated that many times now. They're trying to do the generic thing. And I think that's fine because the generic thing is important. But I think the next level down are kind of the polar kinds of things, time, space, and parameter, and not much else than that. And then enabling more detailed discovery and access kinds of interfaces from aggregators that are, tailored to some audience, be that a broad audience or a very specific audience, and disciplines, I think is important. Enabling that entire range of things is important. And here's an interesting note for you all. One of the most interesting things the planetary data system has done is that they have the concept of a search for search interfaces, where you can enter, you know, what you're looking for, like, you know, Mars craters or something like that, and they'll come back with a list of here's the different kinds of searches that include that, and a statement about sort of what the difference between each of those are, so that you can get to the tool that best gets you to what you really need. It's a very interesting concept, but I kind of thought it was amusing and cool.
All right. So maybe we can put that issue on ice and move on to this next one on the authoritative version of a data set.
We have a question to answer there, but can we not come up with an agreement that if the data site, you know, schema is a reasonable way of typing your citation, if you want to put one in, go ahead and use it? Which
Well,
is, I think, what I heard Matt say.
I don't know if they publish those predicates as a vocabulary, though, honestly. I mean, some of them are double
I don't.
entendre terms.
It's one of the challenges. It's the controlled vocabulary for like types of data site is in the XSD file and their documentation for data site kernel metadata, but it's not published as a separate OWL vocabulary. The SPAR ontologies, that there's a data site SPAR ontology that has captured an old version of that data site schema as partially an ontology. It might have some of them, but it's probably not up to date. So yeah, it is a little bit harder to reference because of the way it's published, but presumably we could probably come up with something there.
All right, that sounds to me like the action item is to tell them to get their act together and give each of those terms an ID and stick it in a repository somewhere. And when they do that, we'll use them. And otherwise they can go jump. I mean, seriously, if it's not ontologized, it's not real.
Ow.
You
Ruth
can't
just raised the bar.
If you can't use it in a linked data system kind of way, it's not really a web resource of any meaning.
Good thing that ontology to ISO 211 exists now, huh? Otherwise we'd all be in trouble.
No, seriously, aren't they thinking about that kind of thing? Are they that behind? You're just smiling. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I don't know what direction they're going to take. I do know that they are focused on getting, you know, the data site kernel metadata for all DOIs. They mostly use XML, and they've moved to some, you know, some JSON representations, but I haven't seen them move in the kind of RDF/OWL direction. So I could ask about that too.
Please do. Because
I mean,
if they're not planning to, somebody should tell them, well, if you don't, somebody else might do this and it'll supersede your authority in this area. I mean, give them a good big threat, okay?
So what's stopping ESIP from just publishing a small little vocabulary that just follows the data site schema?
Absolutely nothing.
You
That
know,
would be
and
my
then-
point. And it's trivial to do too.
It is trivial, yeah. I don't know. Does anyone feel like that might move the needle with data site to sort of manage that? Or does anyone have a sense of why they are hesitant to do something like that?
They probably just don't know anything about ontologies.
Oh, no, Martin is really knowledgeable about this stuff, and he's worked on lots of ontologies and other things. So I think it just hasn't been a priority. It's just that, you know, the system's working. It allows people to register and link out to other stuff, and they haven't really focused on it, is my guess. But I'll ask about that as well.
Okay, thanks,
You know,
Matt.
Mark,
Oops,
you know,
go
Mark is
ahead.
leaving data site.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that that's been really widely disseminated.
Yeah,
but
it's been disseminated because he's, I think next week's his last week.
yeah, so I'll also forward the email to Christian Garza, who's done a lot of the implementation as well. So
You might ask them, and if you aren't planning to and somebody else does, are you going to just adopt it? Because I do note that if you do that sort of thing, some of those organizations will adopt them. I've had that success previously elsewhere.
Okay.
I mean,
Let
a
me make
small
a note.
ontology like that is trivial.
Yeah, I'll just make a note on the issue that, we talked about maybe just setting up a small vocabulary, and maybe that's a product that our group can manage. That's a low effort.
It is a low effort. And yes, I think this group could easily do that.
Okay.
I think that's great. Get that set up, and then if data site gets going, then we can just switch it over and people will already be using it. So
That at least, give us a mechanism for being more descriptive about what those relationships are and in our recommendation. And then, I imagine we'll hear back from Matt on what data site strategy is for using the schema.org citation field, and we'll have a better idea of how to advance that shortly. So, okay. So the next topic that we talked about on Tuesday was this authoritative version. Let's see, just trying to look at it and refresh my memory here a little bit. Jeff Campbell's on the call here with us too. He chimed in quite a bit on that topic. Yeah, Sky mentioned that this is somewhat of an unsolvable problem at scale.
It's also, this is Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
I don't think the whole issue got communicated very clearly on all sides. I think that I guess I'm looking at this from a perspective of working with a large entity that has huge amounts of legacy metadata that was probably originally written in text form, not even XML, for FGDC CSDGM metadata standard. Even parsing that into valid XML is a challenge. So my concern was, do we need to keep track of this? Does somebody want to be able to go back to these previous things? And how do you track that is really what I was trying to get at with that whole question. And, putting more effort into it. Well, how many tens of thousands of records can you put additional effort into to resolve this? And some of it is probably old enough that the people who did it aren't around anymore.
Yeah. So Jeff, I agree with you. Solving the legacy like versioning and linking problems is definitely a big challenge, but
yeah,
that doesn't mean that, we don't have to solve all of the versioning and linking problems to have utility in providing a way for people to represent, say, versioning going forward. Or I think in this particular case, it's versioning is part of it, but really what we're talking about is knowing that there are multiple copies of data sets out there in the repository and aggregator landscape. How can we provide guidance on how to best indicate which of those is the authoritative one? And I think that alone will go a long ways towards making it so that when you have an aggregator displaying something, they're pointing back at the right, copy that is the one that
Okay.
they manage.
I guess my question is the old legacy one the authoritative one because everything else is derived from that, or is the new one now been enhanced and has that become the authoritative one? That was
And I guess my answer to that would be, if it's the same organization, that's their problem. If it's two different organizations, that's the biggest issue, because currently what we have there out in the world are organizations claiming, multiple organizations claiming that they're the authoritative resource because they go and aggregate somebody else's data and don't even keep that identifier in their records. And that's the biggest issue. I think if it's within an organization, they should figure that out themselves. And I would hope that they would keep their own internal records and only make probably the latest thing available. But if they're harvesting, if some group is harvesting data from other places, they should not. Well, one, they should include the original identifier as the authoritative identifier unless they have created a new data product, in which case it's a provenance chain to a new data product. But they shouldn't just claim, and we have real examples of this where we have metadata from Italy that says it's getting data from England, but in reality, neither of them have data, that the original data and the only copy of the data is actually at Goddard Space Flight Center. But it's got 3 identifiers, and Goddard's is not the one anybody ever sees. So that, I mean, that's
right. And this
wrong.
This is not a metadata problem though. This is a policy and
Exactly.
integrity and use and academic integrity and whatever, provenance recognition issue.
But
So
if
I think I would be perfectly fine to withdraw all of the things that I said on whatever that day was, Tuesday. Delete that whole section, and it can be considered out of scope.
Can I just
Well,
say,
people will want to be able to point to what they feel is the authoritative source, and people that have the authoritative source want that to be done. So I think this is critical for the data repositories to have that promoted.
Yeah, I agree with you,
Can I
Nick.
chip in here, please? This topic is actually, I ran a versioning group in Research Data Alliance, and we're now switching back to an interest group, and we're calling it the Authority, Identity and Ethics of Data Reproducing. And that's it's a whole topic for an interest group in RDA, because exactly what Ruth has said with GIS, dashboards, web services, it's just appalling what's going on, and the source repositories are not getting any recognition that they actually own the authoritative data set, and it's cutting into their funding. So when someone says it's out of scope, I just want to let you know it's in the scope of another group that's trying to help solve this. But I don't know, it helps your guidelines, but it's not easy and it's widespread.
I think it needs to be in scope here as well, in the sense of we do need to clarify the semantics of publisher and provider, and like which one is, like how we indicate copies of something and how we indicate that something's the authoritative. And then I know that we won't get repositories, and like the whole social engineering part of that whole problem is kind of like separate, but at least there should be clarity in how you should indicate it in the guidelines when you do know it, right?
I think asking for the authoritative data set gets people thinking, is this copy I'm using the authoritative one? But right now there are stacks of data providers that are doing exactly what Ruth said, just putting a new DOI on it and crediting it to their repository or their system.
And so, yes, I agree. The technical part of this, of how to do it right, needs to be in this document. That's very important to the groups I've been dealing with because they have this problem. But I also think that whatever we can say about how to do this right, you know, like if you're harvesting a record and it has an identifier already, then you can't delete that identifier. You must make it available in your copy of that metadata. And unless you have changed that data significantly such that it's a new data product now, you should credit that as the authoritative copy. I think those are simple things we could do. It's not going to solve the bigger issue, which, by the way, I'm glad you're dealing with, Leslie. But it's a start, and I think it's a good start. And I think the holder community would be very upset if that sort of thing didn't make it in there.
Yeah, so I think there are different levels of depth to this problem too. And, you know, at the simplest level, you have two organizations that hold identical copies of the same data. And it would be nice to just have an indication of which one, say, Google dataset search should show as the sort of owner or authoritative copy and whose logo shows up on that data set in Google dataset search, which right now seems like a random thing to me when I look through the results there. When you get into the questions of new versions of data sets and then derived data sets that were, you know, are partially overlapping with original data sets that may or may not be fully transformed, there a lot of complexities get introduced. So maybe we should just limit this first pass to that case of two repositories hold literally the same data. How do we distinguish publisher and provider and make sure that aggregators are aware of the meaning of those words?
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I mean, especially when I look at what we have for publisher provider now in the guidance, it's not very explicit about the difference between the two. So maybe if we shored that up a bit, it might go a long way.
And then
And
Leslie, is the RDA group working on things like, so there's different types of derivations, like there's a derivation where you just reorganize a data set. So it's not identical, but it has been somehow restructured or transformed and files combined. So that it might not have the same number of files, but it really essentially is the same data set in the sense that the same data is in it, just in a different model or format or organization, or, you know, it's been cleaned up in some way. And that's a different thing than, say, a derivation where you've taken, say, 6 data sets, transformed them, run them through, you know, some sort of fundamental like modeling algorithm, grid filled them, did other things to them. And so you've basically produced new data that wasn't in the original data set, or transformed it in a way that makes it really a new product that depends upon but isn't identical to the original. Is the RDA group dealing with that sort of like those more complex realm of cases?
Okay, I'll put it in the chat. We actually have now got a paper in the Data Science Journal where we say these are the principles, right? So the next phase is turning them into actionable recommendations. And that's where I think we'll get down to that level. It's haha, we're in the same state you guys are in. You know, you got the principles, you got the guidelines, how do you make the rubber hit the road? But the push for us to keep going has been exactly the issue, right? Ruth raised, the ethics of what people are doing in reproducing data in websites. And so, yeah, what constitutes a new version is one of the critical things. But even if they do, you know, rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic, that's not the right word, but, you know, do what you did, rearrange it, they should still be citing the DOIs of the source data sets that are in what they're doing. And so that's another thing people aren't doing is linking to DOIs of previous data sets so that we can map it through. It's all a text-rich block, which is useless for search engines.
Yeah, the science on schema.org does have the provenance relationships now that people could provide those stronger derivation relationships, but you know, I haven't seen any in the wild yet. So
So it sounds like maybe we can just take an action item here to look at publisher and provider records and then walk through some use cases. So, the same data set at two different organizations. One that might have slight modifications, but it's essentially the same data set. Are there other use cases that we need to consider?
I think there are a lot of use cases, but I vote for what Matt was saying. Let's clarify the meaning of these two terms, when you use each, and at least discuss and if it's really the same data, the rule is. And I guess we need to go get Leslie's paper and read it.
I'll just put it in
This
the,
is-
just put it in the chat.
Great, thanks.
This is Dave here. It seems that there's really two aspects to this, though, from the perspective of there's the content provider doing the right thing and referencing the source where necessary and so forth. But it seems like there's also a duty of any aggregators or indexing systems that are collating this information to try and, where possible, verify that the purported origin of the content is actually the origin. And I'm not saying I have any suggestions of how to do that, but it just seems like there's really two aspects to it to really make this all work. And it could be something as simple as, the data set should reference a data catalog, and then the harvester could access the data catalog to verify that record is actually available from there. I mean, that's just a very simple verification, but that's easily spoofed. But I mean, something along those lines may be helpful.
I think your division of the problem into two parts is accurate, or at least a minimum number of parts. And I hope that's being captured, because I think you're right. I do think aggregators have a responsibility, as well as the repositories themselves.
Okay. Great. So I just took some to-dos and put that in the issue. Okay, so the next topic was related to this, and that was the preferred identifier. We did get a little bit of feedback on that. Let me just pull it over. Yeah, so we reviewed all the options in here. There's 7 different ones. Sounded like folks tended to lean towards the sorted list. Sky, you voted for the sorted list as well. Dave, you voted for a sorted list. So just to rehash the issue, you've got multiple identifiers in a block here, as you see on the left-hand side. How do you specify the preferred identifier? In this issue, there's several different ways to do it. There's probably more. Dave has sort of spearheaded this issue and has said that there's pros and cons to all the approach. There's no clear silver bullet. So, I mean, do you think we're at the point where we need more discussion, or do we want to vote on the sorted list? What do folks think?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat arbitrary which one we pick. Again, this is where the guidelines come in. If we can just come up with a convention that everybody agrees to and follow it, then I think we'll all be better off. I don't think there's,
Yeah, not too much.
simplicity is good. Yep.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to go with whichever one. In other words, I'm agreeing with Matt, pick one. and sorted list is probably fine.
I think the main advantage of the sorted list is its simplicity. And the main disadvantage is that it's the fact that you're expressing a preferred identifier is just implicit. And somebody that's looking at the schema.org that doesn't know schema.org, science on schema.org guidelines, won't really realize that we're saying that the first of those is the preferred one. So the other proposals that have, you know, a more explicit semantics to it makes it a little easier for other people to understand that's what's happening when you look at the record. For me, that's what differentiates the different choices. There are, yeah, lots of other technical things, but.
Right. Anyone want to argue against the sorted list or propose something deeper? Something else?
I guess I have a question though, like it wouldn't surprise me. Again, this is related to the authoritative copy problem. You have two different repositories providing a record. Let's say that they do manage to link to both identifiers. So there's two identifiers for a data set, one in each of two repositories. They each list their identifiers in their preferred order, which is that they use them, you know, they each prefer their own. What does an aggregator do with that? Like, just curious, like what kind of guidance do we give around resolving those kinds of discrepancies?
I would say they've left it up to the aggregator to decide. I don't know. That's a good question.
So I guess my question about that is, the authoritative version, if they had that, then the aggregator's done. But if that's optional, then the aggregator is still having problems because they wouldn't know. So I guess the question I'm having is this really the preferred identifier, or do we need a label for identifiers that's not preferred, but something stronger? Like, in other words, can we really merge these two issues into one issue with a recommendation that says, and here's how you do it?
Yeah, is this a provenance statement? So I mean, it's kind of like the preferred identifier should probably be the original identifier, if whatever that means. But
right.
Is there something we can leverage out of provenance? That
sort of. I mean, we know of cases where we have repositories that have existed for a long time, like pre-DOIs, and for their data set, they had an original identifier that wasn't a DOI, and then later on, they issued a DOI for that. So now the preferred identifier is the DOI, but it's definitely not the original one for that data set. And they list all of them in their alternative identifier fields. So I don't know, I think that there does need to, it's not just a matter of who did it first. I think it's which identifier the authoritative curator for a data set asserts is the right one to be used in citations and things like that. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Given that all the copies might have multiple identifiers in their records.
I believe it or not, I think you just agreed with me. But I'm not sure that you think that. and I guess we need to tease that apart a little. In other words, I guess we do need a strong way of saying, of all these identifiers, this is currently the one that is the authoritative one that everybody and their brother should be using. It's not, quote, preferred by a particular aggregator or repository, but is the authoritative one. And if that repository has 12, because that really does happen, I've been associated with repositories that have data that's 50 years old and has 12. The one that's authoritative is the DOI currently, and someday when DOIs are dead and XYZ replaces them, yeah, that authoritative identifier might change because the technology, et cetera, changes.
So maybe we can approach this from the other end. Like, what do we anticipate the harvester to do with this information? Is it that they, elevate the preferred identifier over others? Are they listing them all? And in that case, are they bolding it? Like what's the expectation?
So in data one, we list an identifier in the citation following the ESIP citation guidelines. And so we're constructing a citation from what's in the metadata fields. And when there's 5 identifiers, we need to pick which one is going to be up there in the citation field. So that's my motivation for trying to clarify this, is to see which is the identifier that should be hoisted up into the citation string.
I think another idea about this is that many people want to go to the primary source, sort of like historians that want to, when they're trying to get to the bottom of what actually happened, they'd rather read the letter that somebody wrote than somebody's book that was written 10 years later about the letter. So sort of, many people will want to go back to the primary data set. And so I don't know what aggregators are going to call that, but it will also be nice to have a link or a way of getting to that original data set before it's been munged and translated and changed.
So Nick, I agree that we totally need that, but I think it's a slightly different case. I think that's the derivation chain more than the identity. So when we're talking about the identifier for a data set, I think we're talking about the identifier for things that are basically equivalent to one another. They're the same data set. There's multiple identifiers for it. When what you're talking about, I think, is the derivation chain and being able to follow that through time, so that if somebody has a derived data set, they can trace it back to the original or originals that contributed to it. And I think the provenance block that's already in so I think covers that case. Like, you should be able to say that data set B was derived from data set A in that section of the metadata, so that somebody can trace that for discovery to find the original. But in that case, B and A are different identifiers for different data sets, right?
I guess the authoritative is going to, like Ruth said, in that organization, they can decide what they want to display that original source as the authoritative set. And it might be different from the original data.
All right, so you want to revisit this question of like list versus a more semantically explicit label for the.
Yep.
You do want to revisit that? Yeah.
I guess, yeah. Like, I mean, this discussion has all been around how can we be really semantically clear about what it means to have a preferred identifier. And while I think we all agree that the sorted list is simple and easy and clear, it is really implicit. Like, nobody looking at a schema.org record that doesn't know anything about SOSO would necessarily realize that there's real strong semantics implied in the ordering of the identifiers. Like,
yeah, that's fair. Unless these records are specifying that they're conforming to the SOSO profile, and you're seeing the shackle construct that pulls out that field into an explicit triple without getting too geeky. So that's fair.
So both this and the previous item, the topic, touch on proof of ownership, really. And I'm just wondering if there's some work to be done on sort of reviewing options for simple ways of proof of ownership of digital objects that may be applicable here. We don't want to get into the whole blockchain approach of
yeah, I was wondering if that's where you were going.
just for this. No, I don't want to go there, but there's got to be something simpler. I mean, it's a common problem.
And ownership is not necessarily the right concept.
Well,
it's really stewardship and
authority, stewardship or authority, or just, something. I think we all sort of have this same notion of what we're looking for here. It's just who's authoritative to make statements about this data set.
Yeah.
All right, well, Adam, I think we still have more to discuss here, and yes, I don't know whether you want to keep diving down this. Is it solvable right now in this call? Or
No,
do
I think
people
we should
feel like
move
we have
on.
enough? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great. All right, hopefully the next one is a little bit easier. This is the specifying the keywords from a vocabulary. It seems to me that the schema.org guidance on this is fairly nice in showing you how to use the URIs for these things, if they exist, and if not, what vocabulary they come from, whether that's an RDF vocabulary or a code list or whatever. Do folks have more that they want to say on that topic, or concerns about the current schema.org approach to this? So I can pull up the defined term examples. So this defined term is just specifying where it came from. It's not even giving you a URL for it. There might be a URL for that specific term, but no hardened identifier. The next one is just an even simpler version of that. The third does use the add ID to say that this specific term does have an identifier, and then it came out of a defined term set at a specific URI. Although that URI right there doesn't look like to be a canonical RDF URI for a vocabulary. Neither does
So
this
should
one.
we treat at ID and URL the same? If again, as an aggregator, if we're parsing this, we come across a defined term in a record, and they've provided an ID and a URL,
Yeah,
and they're different. Which one is the term URI we should be linking to?
I would anticipate it being the add ID.
So maybe the SOSO guidelines is the people should put the term URI for the defined term that they're trying to reference in the add ID, and that URL is not really part of the equation. Just to simplify life.
Yeah. I mean, unless it's coming from like the data site vocabulary for relation types, maybe that's a good case. There's no URIs that define those things, but it might be some data site web page with some anchor tag that describes that thing. Maybe you'd use that anchored URL as the URL property. I don't
That's
know.
more
Is
of
that,
a, that's a, are you saying that's the term set? Like defining it more as a thesaurus or vocabulary?
no, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. So like that overall page could be the defined term set. But if there was an anchored tag on that page for that specific term, I don't know, it seems reasonable that someone might put that in as the URL of the term. Maybe that's a horrible example. Just trying to think of other vocabularies that aren't in RDF. Like a Wikipedia.
Well,
Well, I guess Wikipedia does have
too.
lots of URIs. Sorry, go ahead.
GCMD would be an example of that too, I believe, right? There's no URIs for the GCMD keywords.
Yeah.
That's more a question.
Can't this community fix that problem? This is the same thing Ruth brought up a minute ago, like about the data site vocabulary not being at all. Like, why don't we have term URIs or GCMD keywords yet?
I don't know.
I thought that
Not
NERC
chargeable.
had integrated them into their vocabulary, or we're in the process of doing that.
Who had?
NERC?
Oh, I didn't know that.
I
right.
might be wrong, but I believe I heard that.
I think you're right, Chantel, now that you've mentioned it.
So this is Sky. Sorry, I was a little late, but I've been sort of listening in. Yeah, I mean, this whole area, I've been kind of taking a dive into this lately with USGS stuff and all the work that I've been doing and trying to graph everything together. And, you know, I've been really exercising all of our declared terms all over metadata for data sets, for publications, for anything that we've actually declared a term source for things, and just finding a crap load of problems in that. I mean, terms that obviously did not come from any version of whatever declared source they're indicating. And a lot of that, granted, a lot of that is older metadata that didn't have an opportunity to supply a resolvable identifier of some kind. And so hopefully we're getting better in that. But I think in practical use of trying to pull a bunch of things together as an aggregator, trying to bring data assets into play for some type of analysis or integration routine or whatever it is we might do, we're gonna hit those things and say, okay, well, what's the fastest way for me to verify that this thing is actually what it is and what it says it is, and what's the fastest way for me to get to any other references that are associated with this thing, from an ontology sense or from a SCOS sense or whatever it happens to be, and then exploit that in some particular way. So, I mean, I think we want to be, at most clear about the guidance on how to supply a persistent resolvable identifier for the term in question, and leave wiggle room for the other things that are going to be probably variable anyway, some sort of a declared name for the term set, a source for the term set, source URL of some kind for the term set, whatever. Understand that people are going to do maybe a little bit different things in there, but really try to focus in on the most important part, at least from my perspective, which is going to be, give me the fastest route to a persistent resolvable identifier for each term that is declared in the metadata. Just my 2 cents.
Sounds great, Sky. How about @ID for that?
Works for me.
Okay. All right. Anything else that we want to specify there? Or it seems like this one's close, just needs a write-up or a pull request for the proposal.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
It would be nice if we provided guidance on what defined term set means and whether people should be putting URIs or names in there. I've seen examples with just sort of like the name of vocabulary, like an English readable name, and other places I've seen URIs in there. So it would be nice if we provided clarity around what should go in that field. Or maybe it's anything goes, but yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay. For just ready for pull request. I'm happy to do that one. Oh, I guess it's already assigned to me, right? Good times. All right. The last issue was deep time. I don't know if we gave it a ton of time for folks to comment on, at the end of the call. But Nick, did you have a feeling one way or the other of ways that we can make progress here? Certainly Steve gave this proposal of using OWL has time. Oh, is Nick not here with us? Oh yeah, he is, okay. Maybe he's gone. Or anyone else have thoughts on deep time?
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh,
I was just saying, yeah, with Steve's draft decision document, I was reading that over, and with the has beginning and has end, and the numeric, the schema.geoschema.org that we set up for numeric ages, and the stratigraphy.org for the named geologic timescale eras. I think that's probably a sufficient minimum set that we could put into the 1.3. that would cover most of what people want to be able to do minimally with geologic ages. What do people think? And then we could, improve that in the future. But I think that will work for a lot of people that want to be able to describe these.
Sounds good with me. So are we feeling
So
like this
just-
just needs a pull request? Go ahead,
Just to
Matt.
clarify, Nick, I read this a while ago and I don't remember the details, but so people can both specify under Steve's proposal, say a relative, like a geologic age, like Cretaceous,
Right.
or they can specify an atomic numeric value, like 6.2 million years
Right.
before 1950, plus or minus an error on both start and end times.
Well,
is
yeah,
that
we don't
the
have-
essence of the?
We don't have the plus or minus. I would like to add uncertainty stuff, but there's lots of complications with that. But it does have a has beginning and has end, so you can give a range if you want.
Yeah, I guess for discovery, the plus or minus isn't totally.
Yeah,
clear.
I think for discovery, it doesn't. And Doug and I were discussing that a little bit, and you can put that into, that's more of a lower level, like property value or something of a sample or of a site where you would have the actual date. Whereas this is a whole data set, and there's lots of different things that are probably dated in it, and so you're going to have a range. And I think that's sort of a good start. I mean, that's what we would use. We have a summary of our data set that has the range of the dates that have been done on those samples. And I think lots of other people will have this sort of thing. Or you can just have it as one date without it, just the numeric date. Or you can just say it's Jurassic, and then you have a reference to the stratigraphy.org site.
For the definition of Jurassic.
Yeah, for the definition.
Yep. Yep.
And that's the current standard definition by, they're the sort of standard people that are doing it, that people accept they put the spikes in where the boundaries change and determine the dates. And so that's a good start. Eventually you'd like to be able to say which time scale you use for the Jurassic and so on. But for now, I think that's sufficient.
This all sounds good to me.
Yep.
Especially if it's compatible with what Steve and Simon were putting all that work he presented the other day in the geoontology session. Like if it's compatible with just generally that direction people are going, then it seems good. Just keep it lightweight. And
yeah, and I think we can then work on a lot of the more complicated stuff in the future, because if we're going to get it out within some reasonable time, I think that's probably not possible.
All right, great. So next steps, our next cluster calls are Monday, August 2nd and Thursday, August 26th. So before that, I will shoot out just sort of all the to-do list items that we made here today and what issues they're on, just so that everyone's clear on what the next steps are. What am I trying to say? I guess just self-assign and self-work on things. So if you feel like you want to work on something but don't feel like you have the capacity or the knowledge of how to do the pull requests, please feel free to reach out to the group, hit us up on the Slack channel or the mailing list, whatever. I think there's enough of us that have made contributions so far that we can help everyone out. So let's see what we can get done before the 2nd, and we can keep making progress from there. Anything else that we want to discuss today? Right. There's a couple minor issues in this document too that I think, don't need a ton of discussion. They're just ready to go. Although maybe the simple advanced publishing, restructuring the doc is one that we should talk through. But we can save that for a cluster call.
Yeah, on that one, I was just going to note that the Polder group is kind of keeping a high, a simple set of recommendations for that community. So that one might be less important now for at least that group. So yes, I agree. We probably should discuss it in the next regular meeting. Because
Ruth,
yeah.
Are you saying that the Polder group has already maybe done some of that work about deciding what's simple, what's advanced?
They're clearly writing the simple version and not the advanced version.
Yeah.
But it is slanted towards the polar community. The question is, how much is that really polar rather than just, I'm not convinced that there's anything particularly polar about it, I guess what I'm saying. So it may be that you could just adopt that. I'm not clear on that yet. Matt, you've read much of it. It is very simple, and it refers to the existing documents a lot.
Yep. I think it's going to be fine. I think that group is committed to trying to stay consistent, and that document is still pretty young, right? So
it is young, but it
yep.
might be a way of killing two birds with one stone.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least
okay.
it might be a thing we could push to have happen. Minimize amount of work, spread it out.
Yeah, is there going to be further work done on that?
Oh yeah.
Poldar, okay, meeting in September.
Yep.
Okay, so maybe that issue can be on hold until after that meeting concludes.
Okay.
I don't know, is that reasonable or?
No, I think that is reasonable. I think
Okay.
the only reason why that document hasn't proceeded further from where it's at is that it's waiting for this group to proceed on these, on version 1.3.
Yeah. Okay. And can you remind me when that Poldar meeting is? I'll just say that this issue's on hold until then.
It's the middle of September, and if you hold on a second.
No, that's great. I think we could target that.
Okay.
Fourth Thursday call or the next Monday call, whichever one comes right after that, hold our meeting.
Okay.
And that helps us clarify and focus on these other 6 issues that might be more relevant to Poldar that week.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Anyone have anything else they want to contribute? Yeah.
Poldar, by the way, has an E, not an A.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you. Right. Anyone have anything else they want to throw out there? Everyone's ready for ESIP to be over.
This is true. It's been a long week.
Well, thank you very much for all your contributions this week. I think it's been helpful. And looking forward to carrying 1.3 to the endorsement. So thank you for everyone, your contributions here.
Thank you, Adam, for organizing everything.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, Adam.
It was worth setting the alarm for.
Was it worth freezing over though? Like, goodness.
No, I've warmed up. I've got my
It's great to
blanket
have
around
you.
me. So I warmed up. Okay, bye.
Sounds great. Bye, everyone. Take care. Have a great
Thanks all.
weekend.
Bye.
Right.
Bye, everybody.